We'll reconvene in a couple of minutes. All right. We're going to reconvene. It is 5:04. And we're going to go to... What? What?
That was Tom. He said, do I hear emotion?
He's very action-oriented. All right. Are we ready? We're now going to the rebuttal, and obviously it's your time. We would appreciate you addressing the questions that we had specifically, but use your time as you would like. 3 minutes for each, and we're going to go in reverse order and start with the environmental justice speakers.
I don't think there were any questions directed to me, so I'm just going to go off of that.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think I want to readdress that point about allowing new cooperative groundwater monitoring plants. We're a year and a half to this order. Soon we're going to start conversations about the next order. You already have language within this revised order encouraging the Central Coast Regional Board to consider cooperative programs. If you want to change something like that, leave it for the next order. But let's not change what we have in terms of the timelines that for giving the users water quality information. I want to retouch also on the testing that occurs in the wet and dry season. I think, you know, the value isn't only showing the high, but we really want to show that difference if there is one, because it is a tool for enforcement. And let's be clear, the San Lucas example has been brought up, and yes, the grower has been very proactive in that case, but there's also a cleanup and abatement order on the ground, and that's why he's providing them with drinking water. I feel like I had more authority on I would have more authority on the nitrogen reporting tool. But I do want to reiterate that ultimately what you need is the balance ratio, and we have to be realistic about, you know, the staffing within the Central Coast Regional Board and kind of placing this task on them and what we can require from the growers. A lot of this is already in the nutrient management plans that we're asking for. So we want to reiterate this point. And I just want to end with a point. When I talk to community members or I talk to my family who also resides in the Salinas Valley, their response to this kind of program is, nos están dando atole con el dedo, which it's a saying, it's a Spanish saying that says, you know, you have a cup of atole, which is a warm cornmeal drink that's drank very commonly. And instead of giving you the drink, they're just dipping the finger in the drink and giving you a dip of the finger. So while we're testing for water quality, we're not necessarily protecting water quality within this order and within the time frame of this order. And there's been many references to the extent of time that we've been talking about this issue. It was first brought up in the 80s through the two studies, and here we are still kind of talking about slow term changes. So what you can do, just thank you.
I have one question. You said your primary reason for not wanting to see a small window opened on the off chance that there might be more group activity, more coalitions, is because you fear that that's going to create a delay in implementation that's unacceptable, meaning, and I'm assuming you mean 6 months or your year or some significant delay. And I don't know that even that this is possible, and so this is from the regional board, I'll be very curious about this. If you could bring in, you know, if some of the growers did want to form some kind of group effort that could move more collaboratively and possibly even, you know, more comprehensively toward a solution in the same time frame that we're talking about, would you be okay with a group forming?
I don't know how much I can go into it because we do have a petition on the current cooperative groundwater monitoring plan, but I find it very unrealistic that something would be prepared to go by November 1st. Okay. And I understand, I lived in a cooperative all throughout college, and I understand the values and the benefits of working cooperatively and, you know, doing things together, but we need water quality data for these communities now. We were expecting it months ago. So, thank you.
Next, Coastkeeper. Hello, and there you are. Thank you.
Steve Shimmick with Monterey Coastkeeper, representing the keepers. So first of all, this issue about notification of bad water within 10 days. I think it's resolved. Look, it simply is a matter that there is a requirement for notification, and let the board and the owner and versus the discharger work it out. They can do that. On the annual compliance form, we think that the annual compliance form, I stood up there and listened to, people hammering it out. I think that they're working towards a solution. We need a complete annual compliance form that includes the hazard index information, and we need it, quickly, so that we can all assess the efficacy of the order, what's going to be prepared, we can prepare for next steps. The issue of the loading versus the concentration. It's hard because I feel like I have to rebut Darren, who is frankly your person that you all believe, and it puts me in a tough spot. But I would simply ask you, what would you prefer to rely upon? On the one hand, you're saying that the regional board can look this information up and make a guess. Would you rather have reported or nothing reported and have the regional board make a guess, or would you rather have the grower providing you with their estimate of the water that the load that they actually applied using the irrigation water? I would certainly rather have that grower's information instead of the regional board making a guess. I think the idea of having both concentration and an estimate of that load, which is, believe me, it's easy to do. I think that is a good way to go, because then you get both pieces of information, which is important to have. Again, what would you rather have? I would rather have the grower reporting their information. The dry season, wet season. I think you guys got kind of, there was an apples and oranges, or lettuce and broccoli, however we want to refer to it, kind of issue going on. There's one issue of what is the peak, what is the highest nitrate level, because we need to know that in case people are drinking that, and for the characterization. There is also the line of evidence information, which is separate from knowing that peak. And the line of evidence takes dry season versus wet season within a single year, and you're looking for a possible connection between the surface and what's going on with that irrigation water. It may be no backflow device, which would give you a regional problem. It might be something else, but it's a line of evidence. Darren's comment was it's not a general rule. It's not a general rule, even if you see that variation. It's a line of evidence, but it's a critical line of evidence that leads to potentially a solution out there and clean water being provided. Finally, the November 1st date. Gosh, November 1st isn't the date. That's just it. That's the date for submittal. Then it's going to have to be reviewed. And as we've seen in the past, there's been an iterative process of review, then resubmittal, and then another iteration yet. This takes time. You're not talking about a delay till November 1st in a decision. You're talking about a November 1st date for submittal, and then there's an unknown period of time that it's going to take to review, perhaps public process, or at least reporting to the board, debate, another iteration. Don't do that, please. We're trying to move on. We're trying to move ahead. Thank you. And thank you for the extra time.
Next, we have Jensen Family Farms.
I have nothing to pontificate upon. I'm just going to join this stuff.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Thank you, Carrie.
Just a few brief comments. Carrie Fisher, California Farm Bureau. With regard to the groundwater cooperatives, we are for allowing those folks that want to join into a groundwater cooperative the ability, recognizing that we don't want to delay this time frame. I know we have time frames in place, and that there are structures out there for cooperatives that have been approved that could likely be utilized in similar areas, if not incorporated with other folks to make something similar, so that we don't waste a lot of time and have reporting be delayed out. With regard to sampling, the wet versus dry versus the worst case scenario, we would support how the order currently is. We don't see this line of evidence being anything that we know of academic usefulness as currently described, and the worst case scenario is getting the worst case scenario to tackle the drinking water issue. With regard to the annual compliance form, as I've previously said, our members are gearing up towards the October 1st deadline, and we think there is a possible solution to then have in due amount of time the reporting of the nitrate loading risk factor and the nitrate loading risk levels. We would ask that a certain amount of time be granted to educate and inform our members once some sort of annual compliance form or other reporting mechanism for those two specific items is released, to be able to talk to our members and let them know. So we're thinking at least 2 months time once that is available. Thank you.
Is the proposed provision 68 December 1st date acceptable in that
It
regard?
depends on when the ability for growers to be able to then report the nitrate loading risk levels whenever that becomes available.
Oh, so that depends on the regional board
Yes.
furnishing the template.
Yes.
So you just don't want a template to come out 2 weeks before December 1st?
That would be very helpful.
Got it, got it.
Thank you.
Fair point. Grower shipper, please. Ms. Dunham.
Thank you. Okay, so a couple of different things. First, I'll take the cooperative groundwater program and the discussion with respect to allowance of additional coalitions, and I think we have a proposal that maybe might help bridge the gap. So we understand the concern with, you know, the individual sampling and delays that have occurred. So what we would suggest is that there be some type of ability to allow additional cooperatives to come in, whether it's to join an existing one or to create their own. But there would be a couple of things to maybe keep in mind. That first of all, though, because they didn't get an approved one by the deadline, they would still have to do their individual sampling, right? So you still have the individual sampling that would be required, which is what the concern is that they're going to get away for another year without doing the individual sampling. So that would occur. As would under the order, but they would still then have an option to join a third party in order to get the benefit of the characterization and all the other work that the third party is going to do. And there's a couple of different ways. I know that the regional board is very concerned about the staff time and resources associated with negotiating these third party programs. So one, by requiring the individual groundwatering, hopefully that helps to eliminate some of that concern. But two, you know, there's nothing to prevent the executive officer from saying, here is the one approved program, or two, and it needs to look really a whole lot like this, you know, in order, if you want me to consider approving it again, right? There's nothing to stop the EO from doing that. So those are kind of some of the thoughts I would suggest with respect to the third party, and maybe hopefully that helps to bridge the gap. Because I do know that part of my, you know, clients and constituency does have an interest in participating in a third party program because they do want to work on the characterization component. So the second part then I want to talk about are the, we talked about the kind of the dry season, wet season, or the two different samples. And if I'm not mistaken, some of the comments I think I've heard blend inadvertently perhaps different purposes. You know, the purposes of what we've really been talking about with domestic well monitoring is drinking water protection and getting to that information. To make determinations of what's happening on the surface, my understanding from all the technical people I've been listening to over the last 3 and 4 years, that's a very different type of monitoring program and probably something the expert panel is going to discuss. And since it's not before you, let me talk about the dairy program. I think I can. There's nothing that's out there that would be ex parte. So, you know, in the Dairy Representative Monitoring Program, there is a very specific program that has, you know, a representative monitoring well network that is evaluating first encountered groundwater in different scenarios to look at different management practices so you can, from an academic way, determine what is that difference, what's happening on the surface to the groundwater, and with the quickest change. To me, that is a very different type of monitoring program than trying to use domestic well monitoring data for that same purpose. So I think that there's two different purposes there that we need to keep in mind. And then lastly, on the Provision 68 issue, I think we have something worked out. I believe, we'll defer to the regional board, but I think that they have agreed that from when the date of the public form template is available, there's an estimated date that will then give us time. So the current form, as it is, people will fill out by the October 1 deadline, and then they'll have to go back and they're going to have to add in. But between now and October 1, 7 days is just not enough time to shift momentum as to what people are currently doing.
So I have a question for you on the wet, dry.
Yes.
I think I understand what you're saying, that we're talking about two different things, but in terms of the actual language that we have, and I'm looking for it here, on seasonal fluctuations and other variables.
I don't have a problem within that program that the regional board executive officer in evaluating work plans for cooperative programs is looking to see that they're taking in seasonal fluctuations. I have no problem with that language. I was concerned, and someone said, well, no one ever commented. I believe we did comment concerns about the 2 rounds of sampling or for the cooperative program, or maybe it was in the cooperative groundwater program letter that basically got denounced. But anyway, there was some concerns with having the 2 sampling events. That was proposed in the August version. So we, because of the 2 different distinct differences, we do think, through the work plan that the EO has the discretion to consider the seasonal fluctuations.
And then are you comfortable with the EO's determination on what to do on notification in the event that you have a discharger that's not a landowner?
Yeah, I'm fine that we can work that out. That works for folks. And then lastly, the only thing I wanted, there was some discussion about, what if it's over 45 and how do we make a determination between 45 and 120? And the only thing I want to, just remember that if that becomes something that the board desires to add as a requirement to the cooperative program, that there's some additional follow-up monitoring if it exceeds the 45, then to me, that is an additional cost in a cooperative program that isn't a comparable additional cost on the individual program, so you start disincentivizing a cooperative program. So just kind of remember
that we need to keep it equivalent.
Exactly.
Okay. So if we do it there, we have to do it with the individual.
I would think so. I mean, what would be the difference between
Right.
doing it in one program or the other? So.
But then also above 45, you wouldn't have any problem with characterizing it if you have that information.
Well, we would now have no problem if the characterization, well, you need to characterize it in the condo up to the 120 or whatever. I think that would be an appropriate part of the characterization. But to say follow-up monitoring needs to occur, annually, so we know even if it's over 45, to me that would be something that would need to be equivalent on both sides.
Thanks for being constructive in your comments.
May I ask a question, Tess? I know you mentioned that you were concerned with the 12 months in the
Yes.
groundwater, and we were having a discussion about that. Can you clarify what time frame you think is reasonable?
Okay, so hypothetically, if there was an already approved program, so based upon a time frame, we think that, how do you do this? So to do everything that is being asked for, whether right now you do have existing programs that have a time schedule, and what is being proposed would potentially truncate what has already been an approved time schedule. Not by a lot, but it would, and you're adding in new requirements. What I think we could propose is something that we could deal with is if the time frame was, whether it's the November 1 date, it's like a year from the November 1 date to make sure that you do all your contouring, but any follow-up monitoring for that 22 to 45, which has not been anticipated in current existing programs, if we had just an extra, 60 days from like the November 1. So you're basically probably, if you're looking at today, not even 18 months. I mean, you're kind of barely over the year into different phases. I know, I'm really sorry.
Well,
I'm
no,
not being you're just complimenting, I'm being constructive, and
Yeah.
now I'm babbling.
No, I see what you mean, but I think part of what we're trying to do is assure that, I think, not that your entire characterization is done, but that the characterization that's going to give you that information about drinking water is prioritized and done sooner. Because you don't have drinking water wells everywhere. They're not dotted
that is-
uniformly.
So if there was an existing program already approved, it would probably have a program that shows that it's being done in phases, and the last of a third phase was projected from a program that perhaps was approved in July, would be able to complete all the domestic nitrate characterizations by October 30th of 2014. Then if with additional requirement of adding, then to go back and monitor for the 22 to 45 for the phase, the third phase, remember things are phased, you probably would need, you know, maybe 60 days at most. I mean, there
You're
needs to have some
saying get
additional
the
time.
characterization done that would let you know what zone it was all in for drinking water, and then have a little extra time to actually do the follow-up testing.
Exactly.
So maybe this is a question for
I would
Darren
still leave it
also.
to the EO probably. to-
Is there an opportunity to do the follow-up testing as?
Well, and I think
what
it will
Karen
be
Marks-
for each phase, and we're not saying all of it would wait, but, you know, things are being phased for cost, you know, and just for workload and resources. I mean, to be honest, I think the latest that you would then end up, if you're looking at today, you probably would still have everything done by December 1 of next year. Including the follow-up to the 22 to 45. So that would be my estimate.
Okay. Ocean mist.
Thank you. I think our mission is for rebuttal, but I'll counter a few of the things that Mr. Schimmick has said. In his slides, he was talking about how you've abandoned nitrogen balancing, and that's simply not the case. Let's put this in perspective. We are on the cutting edge here in California in dealing with groundwater agricultural nitrate stuff. It's not covered under the Federal Clean Water Act. Nobody has charted these waters before. We are all doing this together. We are going to be getting and submitting to the board and to the public the amount of nitrate in our in our irrigation water, the nitrate in our soils, so that we can do a back calculation so that we're not over applying nitrogen on what we apply, and we are reporting that to you. That's a world of data difference than wherever we've been before. We are doing extensive monitoring, and we are reporting to you, and we're reporting to those who are drinking that water if there's anything that approaches an exceedance. We're doing any number of other things in this order that are really charting a different course, because all these obligations will have a consequence. The reporting of exceedances. There's going to be numerous things happen. Some places, they're going to move people out of housing, others replacement water, others treatment, other new wells. You know, all that doesn't get listed here in our regulation, but these are things that occur as a result of this. So we're going to be farming differently. We're going to be dealing with nitrates far differently, and that is all going to be reported to you, traceable, and we're certainly going to see, you know, some transition and some impact differences. We are not doing nothing here. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Ken.
Okay, Ken Harris, EO Region 3. So I have two items I want to talk about. The first one will be the cooperative. Second one is on Darren's proposal and the comments we had about calculating nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the problems I'm faced with from a philosophical standpoint is I think the board is sending a mixed message by showing concern for those individuals who have who may be drinking contaminated drinking water, and opening up the possibility to allow additional co-ops to come in and join, which will result in delays, and which means people are going to continue to be drinking water that may be tainted that they're not aware of, whereas with individual monitoring, in those areas do not have a co-op, that is occurring right now. Also, it's not a straightforward process in terms of developing these programs, even though it may have been stated that, well, we can take what's existing and copy it. It took us 6 months to negotiate the successful co-ops. Also, we're not staffed. We haven't budgeted for this additional work in the current year, which means we're going to have to find staff someplace to follow up and do this additional work. If we approved another co-op, for example, and they have a different schedule, we're going to have parallel schedules, different schedules that we're going to have to monitor. So the current co-op currently has a schedule. They're implementing that schedule. If we approve another co-op and we give them a different schedule, we now are going to have 2 different schedules that we're going to have to manage in terms of when products and deliverables are due. And there's also no guarantee that I'm going to approve the next co-op. And then what happens? Well, then it goes to the board. There's a delay. The board may override my decision. The board may uphold my decision. If they do, then I'm sure that would be petitioned and would be coming back to you. So there's a lot of reasons I would recommend and request that the board not allow additional co-ops. The train is left. We are making progress, and you heard the EJ community say we're already having some initial discussions about what the next future is going to look like. That's already happening. And one of the things I've told everybody is I think that ag has to decide among itself for the next order how they want to self-organize. And we're open to all kinds of opportunities for that and willing to talk to them about that. But now is not the time. Now that they've had plenty of opportunities to submit proposals. We gave them additional time to do that, and we put in 6 months of staff work to help them try to be successful with their co-ops. 2 of them were, 2 of them were not. Very quickly onto the nitrogen, I disagree with Darren. I think that in the Salinas Valley at least, the growers use sprinklers and they use drips. The growers we've talked to say they know how much water they're putting on. It's straightforward. It's not rocket science. And so it's a simple calculation. And the other concern I have is, what if down the road there becomes a dispute over fertilizer loading, and somebody's going to come back to us and say, well, those are your numbers. They're not our numbers. You estimated those application rates based on the concentration we gave you. I didn't apply that much water. I mean, it's a hypothetical discussion, but now all of a sudden we're putting the regional board in the place of the discharger. We would never do that with a POTW. We're not going to tell the staff at the regional board, well, just estimate what their outflow is every year. No, we make the discharger report that information. Andrew, do you want to say something?
Just in conclusion, I really want to emphasize that we are implementing the order. It is working, and what we really need is some certainty. So with respect to the cooperative programs, we have 2 programs that are approved. Everyone else has done individual. We've already informed 2,000 operators for 4,000 farms of their options to comply. So to create more uncertainty about that just creates confusion in our implementation. And so as we are right now, I'd say we are in a good place. It's working, and everyone knows what they need to do with respect to the cooperative groundwater monitoring.
Questions?
You've made it clear that you'd prefer what you would prefer. Do you see no value if there are some growers who might go into a cooperative program? This is no value, no positive value, that might go into a cooperative program while they are, as Tess suggested, continuing to report, so we're getting the information about their wells because they're doing individual reporting. But they want to start now rather than in the future on characterization of their basins. So it seems to me that you'd want to do everything you could to encourage that, particularly if you can continue to get the information that you need about the drinking water situation. I understand the workload piece of it, which I completely in sympathy with, but it's the goal of cleaning this up that is, to me, getting delayed by not encouraging more folks to be in groups.
To answer your question, no, and I'll tell you why. There's only, I mean, Salinas, the Central Coast is, it's pretty simple in terms of its layout. There's a northern part, there's a southern part. And the southern part, the Santa Maria area, for example, is an adjudicated basin. It's already been highly studied. It's managed much like they do in Southern California in terms of they have 2 reservoirs they release water from for recharge. So it's not an unknown basin. This is not a basin that needs to be characterized.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just still not, I'm not following this at all, because I think you're still gonna get more information. You've got a commitment that you would get individual sampling. And if this is where you're going to be headed in the next round, and I can't imagine why not get going with it now? I mean, the task force is moving in that direction. I am going to just guess that the expert panel is going to move in that direction as well. I mean, these programs are the future, and in the order that we have right now, and the language has been in there for quite some time, this is something that we're encouraging. So, I mean, this is something that I support, and I would just hope that you would, I mean, you're saying that you would have the discretion, and of course you would. I would just encourage you to be open to an alternative approach. And I think that I complimented Tess on being constructive, because I think that, you know, she was responding to the concerns raised by those that didn't want to see this program go forward now, for it to be expanded now because of the concern about delay. And I think she came up with some you know, reasonable ways that it could be constructed so that you get more, you get that individual sampling, and with very limited delay.
So the way I would respond to that, it's going towards 6 o'clock. It's been a long day. Having worked for this board for 25 years, I know that when you negotiate things or language late in the day like this, and this is a complicated issue, many times it doesn't come out the way you expect. So I'm not willing to commit the regional board to a proposal that we've talked about for 5 minutes in terms of the details. I would have to sit down with Tess and others and spend time working out the details before I would feel comfortable agreeing to such a change.
The other thing I want to point out also is that the current order doesn't prevent growers from getting started with a cooperative effort. In fact, the current order actually encourages it. There are many findings and conditions that encourage the formation and implementation of cooperatives, as long as they comply with the requirements in the order. So I think that there will be opportunities for cooperatives, as you describe, to sort of evolve, even in the context of this current order.
In the current order? Evolve or expand? I'm not.
I'm sorry, I was talking about our current, the Region 3's agricultural order. So even if we leave the requirements as is per the state board's draft order, without the language allowing new cooperatives explicitly to submit proposals by November 1, it doesn't prevent growers from forming groups, implementing practices, evaluating them, and evaluating the effectiveness of those practices in the context of water quality. All that can still happen.
It would just be a cooperative that we don't, it does not have formal regional board endorsement. They could go ahead and set it up. They could have a board of directors, and they would just do exactly what's required of them currently.
Right, which would be similar to what it would. Are you saying that you would get the same impact of what Ms. Dunham said, or are you saying you're not totally sure?
No, what they would do is they would still basically be under the individual monitoring monitoring requirements. But if they wanted to put together an organization to share cost and this kind of stuff to help growers with technical expertise or monitoring, they could do that. But they would still be reporting as individual growers.
Might be. Okay. Question? Other questions?
So we're back then to Central Coast's suggestion of changing the language that you drafted on September 20th with the November 1st deadline. So they've stuck to that in terms of what. Now, does a question to staff on that, and then I'll be satisfied, I think. If we keep the language, are we assured that the individual monitoring will keep going? Or do we need to change the language?
I think we would need to change the language to add that any dischargers currently doing individual groundwater monitoring continue with that, but have the option also of joining a cooperative groundwater monitoring program.
Okay. So that's the one place where we need to change. And by the way, all due respect, Mr. Harris, I'll do work till 10 o'clock tonight if I have to wrap this up. So that's an area that where I want to see if fellow board members are comfortable. I'm comfortable with the proposed language with the modification to make sure the individual monitoring comes in. Okay, is that clear? Okay, and I appreciate the discussion. I'm a little, like I say, I'm not thrilled that the comments about nitrogen and water load have been brought up at this late hour in our process, but these are compelling discussion points. I appreciate the EO Harris weighing in on that, and I'm persuaded. I think I would propose that we change milligram per liter to loading units in water in this order.
Would we do both or just?
Well, that's the question
Report
is
both.
what
You can
the-
report
what the
concentration because it's a measurement, so you might as well just throw it in there.
It'd be concentration and amount, right?
Yeah, and I don't think this is very controversial.
So, if I may, and Dee Dee can back me up, she was at the task force too. It was a very controversial item at the CDFA task force. Mr. Harris has completely